Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Rachel and I'm an archaeologist. Like many other archaeologists, one of the things that inspired me towards this career as a child were the Indiana Jones films. Dr. Jones is undoubtedly one of, if not the most recognizable representation of archaeology in pop culture. And so in the lead up to the release of the fifth film, I am digging deep into the archaeology featured in the entire series. I've already covered the first two films, Raiders of the Lost Ark and Temple of Doom. If you haven't seen them yet, make sure to check them out. They are linked here and in the description down below. Today, I'm discussing the archaeological methods, sites, and artifacts seen in the third film, The Last Crusade. What happened to the Holy Grail? Is there a secret brotherhood protecting it? Does the canyon of the crescent moon actually exist? I'll be answering these questions and more in this video. Before we begin, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so you can know right away when my next video comes out. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. This really helps to promote it in the YouTube algorithm. I spend the equivalent of a workday writing, filming, and editing each of these videos, so you taking a few seconds to subscribe or like it to help me out is very much appreciated, as it really shows your support for me and the videos that I make here. Okay guys, let's dig in. The Last Crusade begins in 1912 in Utah with Indy and his Boy Scout group on a camping trip and stumbling upon some professional looters/grave robbers. The artifact that is the focus of this flashback is the Cross of Coronado, which Indy does a very good job of identifying on site from very far away with no other clues about its provenience. There is no Cross of Coronado artifact in real life. However, the namesake of the cross, Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, did exist. According to the film, the cross was given to him by Hernán Cortés in 1521, which is not historically correct, as at this time Coronado would have been 11 or 12 years old and still living in Spain. Coronado moved to present-day Mexico in 1535, where he married an heiress and became the governor of the Kingdom of Nueva Galicia in northwest Mexico. In 1539, he dispatched two men on an expedition towards present-day New Mexico. When one of them returned, he told of a golden city of vast wealth called Cibola. Now known as Zuni Cibola Complex, this is a real place. It is a collection of prehistoric and historic archaeological sites on the Zuni Pueblo in western New Mexico. Upon hearing of the mythical riches, Coronado organized a military expedition in 1540 to explore New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, but not Utah. The journey marked the first European sightings of the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River. Upon reaching Cibola, Coronado discovered that the tales of the city's riches were lies. He subsequently occupied the region and used it as a base for further expeditions and invasions of Native American settlements, which were equally fruitless in their search for riches. Coronado returned to Mexico in 1542. The expedition bankrupted him, and he was charged, and then cleared, with war crimes. Coronado remained in Mexico City, where he died of an infectious disease in 1554. He was buried under the altar of the Church of Santo Domingo in Mexico City. Next, we have Indy teaching what I presume is an Archaeology 101 class and saying, and I quote, "Archaeology is a search for fact, not truth. Forget any ideas you have about lost cities, exotic travel, and digging up the world. We do not follow maps to buried treasure, and X never, ever marks the spot. 70% of archaeology is done in the library. Research, reading. We cannot afford to take mythology at face value." End quote. This is a really great and mostly accurate speech about archaeology. At the end of his class, he also mentions Flinders Petrie's excavations at Naukratis in 1885. This is a fantastic Easter egg and probably something that only an archaeologist would notice. Flinders Petrie was a British Egyptologist and a pioneer of archaeological methodology and artifact preservation and identification. Naukratis was a city and trading post located southeast of the Mediterranean Sea and Alexandria. It was the first, and for much of its early history, the only permanent Greek colony in Egypt. The site was discovered by Flinders Petrie, who dug there from 1884 to 1885. After class, we see Indy in his office, which is a very accurate set. I had professors at university whose labs and offices looked very similar to this, with artifacts, mostly ceramics, everywhere as they were in the midst of being analyzed. When Indy is meeting with Walter Donovan, there are several historical events and places mentioned. The first I'm going to cover is Joseph of Arimathea. According to the Gospels, Joseph was the man who assumed responsibility for the burial of Jesus after his crucifixion. He is venerated as a saint, and in the late 12th century, he became connected with the Arthurian cycle as the first keeper of the Holy Grail. This idea first appears in a poem by Robert de Boron, where Joseph receives the Grail from an apparition of Jesus and sends it with his followers to Britain. I will talk more about the Grail specifically and the Arthurian legends later in this video. In this scene, we also see Indy using champagne to, clean the marker stone that he's interpreting. This is a definite no-no, especially with something like champagne. Not to mention that it's really not necessary because the text is obviously pretty clear from the interpretation that he just did. Walter then regales us with another bedtime story, speaking about the Grail being lost and then found by 3 knights of the First Crusade. This story, the monk, and the book in the scene are all fictional, but there is a set of 3 famous brothers who went on the First Crusade. The First Crusade is obviously the first in a series of religious wars waged by the Christian Europe to recover the Holy Land from Islamic rule in the medieval era. It began in 1095 when Byzantine Emperor Alexios I requested military support against the Seljuk Turks. Later that year, Pope Urban supported the request and also urged faithful Christians to undertake an armed pilgrimage to Jerusalem. This call was met with an enthusiastic response across all of Western Europe. Members of the high nobility and their followers embarked on this journey in 1096, and the feudal host included these 3 sons of the French Count of Boulogne, Eustace, Godfrey, and Baldwin. After the successful fall and subsequent massacre of Jerusalem, the Crusaders set up the new Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem. Eustace returned home to France, while Godfrey was elected the first ruler of the new state, and Baldwin was made the Count of Edessa, another Crusader territory. After Godfrey's death in 1100, Baldwin then became King of Jerusalem. It's entirely possible that the 3 brothers in the film are an allegory for the 3 famous brothers that first ruled over the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem. This may or may not be the case, but it makes sense in my head. Shortly after, we are introduced to the Grail diary of Indy's father, Dr. Henry Jones, which is a great example of an archaeological tool being used in the film. I myself have kept many small notebooks out in the field for just jotting down things before I can put them on context sheets. Indy then heads to Venice to meet Dr. Elsa Schneider and find the tomb of the second brother containing the other half of the Grail marker. The choice of Venice is an interesting and historically logical one for the film. From the 9th to the 12th centuries, Venice was a powerful maritime empire and a flourishing trade center between Western Europe and the rest of the world. It makes sense that they used it as somewhere that a Crusader knight would have stopped and died. However, he would not have been buried in an underground catacomb as depicted. Venice doesn't have any catacombs in real life, as the city is built on wooden pilings on islands within a saltwater lagoon. The church that was converted into a library in the film is the real-life church of St. Barnabas in Venice, which is actually now deconsecrated and used for exhibitions. After finding the second marker, Indy is chased by some men wearing fezzes, who are revealed to be members of the secret society called the Brothers of the Cruciform Sword. No such organization exists, that we know of, and it seems they were loosely based on the Knights Templar. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ in the Temple of Solomon, aka the Knights Templar, were a Catholic military order founded around 1119. They started as an elite group of knights who defended Christian pilgrims venturing across Europe to the Holy Land. They initially relied on donations to support their operations. Their official name and emblem of the 2 Templar knights riding on a single horse were symbols of their initial poverty. However, they quickly became a favored charity and grew rapidly in membership, money, and power. Templar Knights were among the most skilled fighting units of the Crusades. They were also prominent in Christian finance, as non-combatant Templars managed a large economic network and developed innovative financial techniques, things like letters of credit, that were precursors to what we use in modern banking. Eventually, their support faded as they became unable to secure their holdings in the Holy Land. Rumors about their secret initiation ceremony created distrust, and in 1307, King Philip IV of France, who was deeply in debt to the Templars, pressured the Pope to have many of the order's members in France arrested, tortured into giving false confessions to charges ranging from heresy and homosexuality to idolatry and fraud, and then burned at the stake. In 1312, the Pope then disbanded the order. The abrupt disappearance of a major part of the medieval European infrastructure gave rise to speculation and legends about its continued existence. Some people think that the Templars went underground and continued to operate in secret. Modern organizations like the Freemasons are often believed to be their descendants. Conspiracy theories and fiction place the Knights Templar as guardians of religious relics like the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant, although no archaeological or historical evidence of such a connection between the order and these ancient artifacts exists. As Indy goes to Austria to rescue his father, we are introduced to our primary villain, the Nazis. They are occupying Grunwald Castle, which in real life is Schloss Bürresheim, a medieval castle northwest of the town of Mayen in Germany. It is built on rock in the Eifel Mountains above the Nette River and is one of the only castles in the region which has never been destroyed. It was inhabited until 1921 and is now a museum. As far as I could find, it doesn't have any tapestry collections to examine. I already explained about the Nazis and their historical search for valuable religious relics and art in my video on Raiders of the Lost Ark. If you want to know the full story, you can watch it, but to summarize, the Nazis had a whole department of scholars and experts researching the cultural history of the Aryans and the race's supposed superiority to all others. This included stealing religious artifacts like the Grail and the Ark of the Covenant. Indy reunites with his father, who promptly breaks a Ming vase over his head before claiming that it's a fake. He says that you can tell by the cross-section, which is a sort of actually correct. Archaeologists do examine cross-sections, which we actually call fabrics, of ceramics to help us identify them. You probably could tell if something was a fake looking at the fabric, but it's not really my area of expertise, and I imagine you would also have to include looking at other elements of the vessel like the paint or the style or the colors that are used. Indy tells his dad that they figured out that the start of the route to the Grail is in Alexandretta, modern Iskenderun. Its history dates back to 333 BCE, when it was founded by Alexander the Great to mark his victory over the Persians at the nearby Battle of Issus. The film places the city in the Republic of Hatay, which is also a real place/thing. It was a transitional political entity that existed from September 1938 to June 1939. During the transitional state, there was no sultan, and the cityscape shown as the capital of Hatay is in fact Istanbul. In July 1939, it was annexed by the Republic of Turkey as Hatay province. Now we come to the Canyon of the Crescent Moon and the temple housing the Grail. This was filmed at the real-life site of Petra in the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. I have been to Petra 4 times as a part of my digs in Jordan, so I could probably make a whole video on it, but I'll stick today with the points that are relevant to the film. Petra's original name was Rakhmu, or something similar sounding to that, and it was the capital city of the Nabateans, who were nomadic Arabs that used Petra's proximity to the incense trade routes to establish it as a major regional trading hub. A desert people, they were particularly good at water management, agriculture, and stone carving. Petra flourished in the 1st century CE, and its population peaked at an estimated 20,000 inhabitants. The Nabatean kingdom eventually became a client state of the Roman Empire, but in 106 CE, it lost its independence, was officially annexed, and Rakhmu became the capital of the province of Arabia Petraea, which is where we derive its current name from. Petra's importance gradually declined, and by the early Islamic era, it was abandoned except for a handful of Bedouin nomads who made their homes in the elaborate rock-carved tombs the Nabateans left behind. Petra's importance gradually declined, and by the early Islamic era, it was abandoned except for a handful of Bedouin nomads who made their homes in the elaborate rock-carved tombs that the Nabateans left behind. It remained unknown to the Western world until 1812, when Johann Ludwig Burckhardt rediscovered it. The Canyon of the Crescent Moon is based on the Siq, the main entrance to Petra. It is a dim, narrow gorge approximately 1.2 kilometers long, with walls between 91 to 182 meters high. It is a natural geological fault split apart by tectonic forces, later worn smooth by water. It ends at El Khazna, the treasury, which is a stand-in for the Grail temple in the film. This structure, carved out of the sandstone rock face, is one of the most elaborate buildings in Petra. It is believed to have been the mausoleum of the Nabatean king Aretas IV in the 1st century CE. It became known as the treasury in the early 19th century because of the local Bedouin legends claiming that the decorative stone urn high on the 2nd level contained treasure. In reality, the urn is solid sandstone, and any treasures the tomb may have contained were looted long ago. In a direct contrast to the elaborate exterior facade, the inside comprises a plain main chamber and 3 antechambers, and not a whole thing that you can go into behind it, as portrayed in the film. Now we come to our main artifact of the film, the Holy Grail. Historically speaking, there are two grails, the Christian and the Arthurian. In Christian tradition, the Holy Chalice is a vessel, which is either a cup, chalice, or platter, that Jesus used at the Last Supper to share wine with the apostles, saying it was the covenant in his blood. The Bible makes no mention of the cup except within the context of the Last Supper and gives no significance to the object itself. A pilgrim writing in 570 CE said that he saw the cup of onyx which our Lord blessed at the Last Supper among many relics displayed at the basilica erected by Constantine near Golgotha and the tomb of Christ. Another tradition says that St. Peter brought it to Rome and it was passed on to the popes. Allegedly, in 1258, when the Christians were being persecuted by Emperor Valerian and the Romans demanded the relics be turned over to the government, Pope Sixtus had the chalice smuggled to safety in Spain. There are two artifacts, or relics I guess, held by the Catholic Church that are claimed as being the Holy Chalice. However, this was done in the medieval period. The first is Santo Calice, an agate cup in the Cathedral of Valencia, which is purportedly from the 1st century CE. It is probably the most widely known claimant to being the Holy Grail. The second is the Sacro Catino in Genoa Cathedral, a flat dish made of green glass which was recovered from Caesarea in 1101. However, it was not identified as the Holy Chalice until much later, towards the end of the 13th century. The Arthurian Grail comes from literature and legends about King Arthur, where the Holy Grail is a cup, dish, or stone with miraculous healing powers, sometimes providing eternal youth or sustenance in infinite abundance. It is often guarded in the custody of the Fisher King and located in the Hidden Grail Castle. The earliest known account of Arthur's Grail comes from a 12th century romance novel written by Chrétien de Troyes. Scholars have long speculated on the origins of the Holy Grail before Chrétien, suggesting it may contain elements of the trope of magical cauldrons from Celtic mythology and later Welsh mythology, combined with Christian legend surrounding the Eucharist. As I mentioned already, Robert de Boron then went on to associate the pre-existing story of the Arthurian Holy Grail with the Holy Chalice, Joseph of Arimathea, and Jesus' crucifixion. This association was continued in many subsequent Arthurian works, and via the film has now made its way into mainstream pop culture. Similar to the Temple of Doom, there is not much actual archaeology going on in this film. There are unfortunately no dig sites like Raiders of the Lost Ark. I would probably count reading the tablet and his paltry attempts to clean it, using the Grail diary and notebook, and making a rubbing of the shield as archaeology. Although, the disrespect that he shows for human remains when he uses a femur for a torch in the catacombs is really not cool. Overall, it is a good time, and it is definitely one of my favorites, if not my favorite, in the trilogy. Okay, everyone, that's it for today. What do you think of The Last Crusade? Is it your favorite film in the series? Do you think that the Holy Grail really exists? Let me know in the comments down below. If you've made it all the way to the end and you like this video, don't forget to take a moment to give it a thumbs up to tell the algorithm to recommend it to more people. Early next week, before the film comes out, I'll be taking on the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which ties with Temple of Doom for my least favorite in the series. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you can watch as soon as it comes out. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!